What the you always fucking don't do this.
You're a smart person, and what you did was not very smart.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so you're just not going to talk to me now.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, baby.
I think you owe me an apology. Oh,
Fuck.
I'm a fucking idiot.
Yeah, you shouldn't do that just because, I mean, here it goes, shooting everybody. Y'all shouldn't do that.
Shitting all over the place.
Shouldn't everywhere.
Depends. Communication, that's what we're talking about today. And it's important in everything, particularly though romantic relationships or emotionally intimate ones. It's key. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to find the right words.
No, intimacy is developed, I think, primarily by communication. It's what builds your trust and everything.
You can't read each other's minds. I mean, we try, but no. Right,
I mean,
so we need to communicate those things that we want.
Try.
And think and feel.
Do I try to read a mind? No, I don't feel like I try to read a mind, but I do try to. You do analyze.
You know what my biggest turn on though is when my partner is so perceptive. Yes, it is I want them to want to wash the dishes.
That's
No, I'm just kidding. That's a reference to a movie. I'm sure you know.
But there's I don't. But
no,
someone might.
No, it's probably too mainstream for you.
Maybe it's mainstream. Maybe it's very.
They were words uttered by Jennifer Aniston, so that tells you everything.
Oh, I like Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah, it was from the breakup.
Watched anything.
It's from the
I didn't see
breakup.
that movie.
Yeah, they break up, and she was mad at him because he wouldn't.
Who was he?
Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes, communication is key because we can't read minds, and so we could talk about actually just like our differences and stuff like that because
even if you could, I'm sorry, but even if it could read minds, so maybe I know what you're thinking, but I don't know where you're coming from when you're thinking that. Your perspective is also just as important as, so it's not just the words, but it's also your vantage with those words.
Well, you only can get there if you've communicated enough so that the other person can anticipate what it is that your needs are. Because I think for me, when I framed it as like it's a turn on, it's because it's like I feel seen.
Yeah.
And that implies an intimacy level that we've achieved, right? It's like intimacy level unlocked, achievement unlocked kind of thing. But yeah, you can't get there if you don't. So it takes time and communication to get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. But it is also my weakness when it comes to romantic relationships to express my needs expresses a vulnerability. I'm very much, my relationship style is I self-sacrifice. That's my love language. Self-sacrifice, and I want, I want to people please. Like I have a lot to work on. And so when it comes to communication, I have so much sitting like right on the edge that it brings me to tears to talk about what I need honestly.
Do you talk about that with yourself? Because that's where communication starts to tell.
I will make myself cry thinking about what it is that I actually need and want.
But are you processing the needs and wants for yourself as well? And are you actually trying to get them delivered to you or attaining them? Or do you just think about them and you think about how you don't have them and that's why you're crying? That. Okay. But that...
My finger got really close to your face.
That's
I meant
okay.
that
No,
in a very much like zing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I feel like I don't have them. I mean, I guess I'll just continue to share my baggage as we go, but it's definitely however it was I was formed as far as like what I feel I deserve as a human.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, whatever influences I haven't really figured out exactly what contributed to this. You haven't
unpacked that. It's still in the bag.
What?
You haven't unpacked that?
Oh,
it's still in the bag?
It's heavy on my back right now.
Oh.
Bag lady for sure.
Okay.
From the beginning, I've always felt like, at least not in a family sense, but in a romantic sense, even as a kid, somehow I felt this, like that to know me is to love me, but at the same time, I'm unlovable. And
you believe you're unlovable still?
That was reinforced by external factors.
Okay.
So like...
It's understand and
right,
a lot
external
of people...
validation type things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like crushes at school never like liked me back.
Right.
That's actually one of the
So you start writing that story in your head.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not lovable. I'm not lovable. I'm not lovable.
Yeah, like I love myself. I mean, you could dice that all you want, but like I think I'm stoked on who I am, and so it confuses me when it's not working out, and that other who I have feelings for, that it's not reciprocated. So I've built and I collect the evidence to support that, and so when to answer your question earlier about how did you word it, like with my needs, and then when I think about what I want and stuff like that, I make myself cry thinking about that stuff.
Thinking about how you
It's
don't
because
have them.
because I don't have them.
But you're not thinking about how to attain them.
I don't know
in
how.
that moment.
That's my struggle, man. I don't know how to attain them.
Would you like to share any of those needs, or is that too vulnerable right now?
I don't even know how to simplify.
Even one of them.
One of them? Are we gonna get me to cry?
I have no idea.
Okay, I would like to. Okay, we'll keep it simple. I just said that I feel unlovable. I want to feel loved.
You want to feel loved.
Yeah.
I think that starts with yourself.
I knew you were gonna say that.
But it's the truth.
And I know, and I know that
it's a lot of hard work to get there too.
Yeah,
and constant.
But here's the thing: is like I think I do, right? Because I like who I like. I wouldn't change a lot of who I am.
Yeah.
But it is definitely, there are certain things that I do that indicate that I should love myself more, so it's not as like clear. So I like who I am, and I like how I look. I like my personality, all of that. But then I guess I do things like if I'm home alone, then I will be less inclined to take care of myself in the way that I would if someone else was around, because like I will make food for them, and then does that make sense? Like,
right.
Like I
so
am
you
more
want to take care of your partner.
I want to take care of somebody.
Right, but you don't want to take care of yourself.
Not that it's a choice that I make.
It's not about a want.
It's not a choice that I make. It's not like I'm going like I don't want to take care of myself.
Yeah.
It's just more like like I will let myself slip.
I do that. I do that, and I feel that I love myself very much. But I do that, and there's a lot of self-care that I don't take care of as a result of it. And I have those conversations with myself. I need to be doing this more. I need to be doing this more, especially when I'm going through, like if I'm working a show or something for the course of a week, my place will get thrashed, which adds to my mental sort of stress for the week, because I'll just be like throwing clothes around. My kitchen will get dirty. I probably am not eating as much dinners. So to be able to have the conversation with myself about being in a positive place while I'm going through this like chaos is nuts. And you just surround yourself with that chaos, and then you clean it all up and you start again. So I understand not taking care of yourself in that way, but I mean, it's baby steps.
It is baby steps. I mean, just acknowledging that is the case. And I've actually learned that in the situation that I'm in now. It's a relationship, but it's more a situationship. I told you this.
Situationship.
Yeah, because we haven't, I would like for it to be a relationship in the way that I prefer my relationships to be, monogamous and all that. But that decision isn't mutual, for various reasons. And for the longest time, I took that personally. But I also, for the majority of this situationship, and I also just like saying that, for the majority of the situationship, I haven't really voiced my needs because I didn't think that would be conducive to getting that relationship, which is a problem.
Yeah, that's the exact opposite of what you should be doing.
Right, but I told you, like, my whole thing is,
you feel like that's going to scare them away or whatnot, or that's going to not create better community.
I don't know about scaring, if it's exactly the word, but more like, and this is how I am in a lot of other ways, I don't like being a burden.
Sorry,
puppy snoring. Yeah.
Good moment. A burden. So you think you're a burden by expressing yourself and being vulnerable with your partner, who is the one person you're supposed to be the most intimate and communicative with?
Yes. I'm like that with my family.
No, I know that's clearly a system wiring that needs some tending to.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But it's nice to be aware of it.
And then this situation has led me to be more aware of it, because because there was circumstances in our relationship that definitely it made sense for why we couldn't be together, you know? So it created very trigger happy, emotionally reactive
What
interactions.
what made sense? There was distance. Now you're not distant. Now
I mean,
you're in the same living
there's a lot of
situation.
things I'm not even getting into,
Yeah.
but it was just a lot of factors that basically wasn't as simple as like I like you and you like me and let's be together. There was a lot of factors, and there was resistance to that, and you know what? He had some things that he was going through and decisions that he needed to make that were his own journey, growth journey, and it had nothing to do with me, right? But
Sometimes it's a slow burn to get to that space.
right.
And that's okay.
But the thing is there's something about us that kept us in each other's lives in a way that was like very much immovable.
But it wasn't vulnerable communication.
At times, but there wasn't a consistency in it because we weren't actually like there wasn't.
You weren't committed to that idea.
We weren't committed to that idea, but also there was just not as much opportunity to have those conversations, right? Because when we did spend time together, it was about making it like, you know, I mean, you know, yeah, sexual and like focused on just how great that is. And yeah, I mean, it was unhealthy attachment for a period of time. And so I definitely acknowledge that, but then it kind of evolved out of that into other things. But at the end of the day, we both have stuff that we need to work on. And so what I learned out of this situation, and he's pointed it out to me, like he's actually, you know, like he's saying that pointing out my stuff at me to force me to realize that that's what I was doing. I had nobody had done that for me before.
Yeah. It's
know?
good to have a good mirror.
Yeah.
A loving mirror who's doing it in
Yeah.
a way to help you along and not to just say, look, dude,
yeah.
this is what you are. Ugh.
Right. But I took it that way for a period of time because I'm here.
Was
like,
it expressed that way, or did you just take it that way out of curiosity?
Well, okay.
Because
Maybe
sometimes the way that we transmit our information changes how we receive it.
I mean, it's on my list of like things that to be aware of for good communication, but tone and intonation are very much, you know, factors.
There's a big transmission.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say there was a variety of ways in which that was communicated to me. But it was just in where my frame of mind was. I mean, it could even be like clockwork, time of the month, I'm a little bit more sensitive and things like get me, you know, trigger me quicker than other times and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, the
timing
consistency
is super important.
Yeah.
That's
timing
another, that is another one on the
on this list. Yeah, exactly. But it's like
this list. What is this list we keep talking
about?
I
know. There's always a list. They're all over the internet.
Yeah, they are.
But yeah, but what I learned through whatever type of response I had, I knew the consistency there was that I was unable to ask for what I needed because it made me too emotional because I didn't think I was going to be able to get it, or, you know, just things that like where it all boils down to I did not want to be a burden, or maybe, you know, didn't expect to be able to get those, so why bother, like that stuff.
Well, and so I think a lot of that I find comes in the foundations that you build in that relationship. So you don't ask for what you need, and you probably still are not necessarily doing that, or maybe you're doing it better. But
I think I'm at an awareness stage.
Okay.
So that's where.
So maybe you'll be doing it better soon.
Yeah, I hope so.
I think we build these sort of rapports with people, and this is any relationship. They say the foundation of your relationship is built on that first interaction in your first 10 seconds sometimes, or I forgot what the seconds are, but something to that degree. And I believe that, and I believe it too, because I look at my different friendships and it's like, if I built it on music, then that's what it is. If we built it on jokes, then we have this really joking thing. If we you know, we built it on this and here we are. You know, with my partner, we built it on really strong communication, and we both emphasized that's what we were looking for in a partnership. And I think that's why we have it, because we from the gate were talking about it, and also long distance, as I said in previous, demands it.
Yeah.
And dealing with some of the open styles also demands it. So some of the things we built into the relationship specifically because we wanted to ensure that our communication was always going to have to be top notch. And so we created it so that there are going to be things that we are going to have to talk about that will implore us to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I would say the foundation for my relationship it wasn't a healthy situation for sure. It was really, attachment based.
Yeah.
And so right now I see this period of time as an opportunity to deconstruct that or unlearn really,
Right.
and build a better foundation.
Right.
So
and the question is always, when you're rebuilding a better foundation, is your partner willing to do that with you, and is it possible with that partner? And I hope it is.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that he was the impetus for that because of how he would hold that mirror
right
at my face and go, "This is what's happening." You realize. And then I had to go, "What what do you mean? Like, tired of all this, whatever, pulling up the past and all that stuff." But now I go, "Oh, okay, you're right. I totally see all of it." And so I know that I have work to do. And he has acknowledged that he has work to do.
Which is always beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. But the common ground is that, we care about each other.
Right.
So whatever the situation is, it's always going to be one of love. Maybe it's not sexual, romantic, but so
this could develop into a friendship per se, and it
is a friendship, really. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like there's a hurdle to get there for me, which is
for everybody.
Yeah, rejection. Rejection is a very, to go back to the point about unlovable, right? Rejection is a reinforcement of that feeling about myself.
Interesting.
Right. So
that's about not taking. And so the lesson, which I know you're very aware of, is about learning to not take it personal, which you've expressed you're trying to learn.
Yeah. Because
that's one of the 4 agreements.
Yeah. I not that long ago, like a couple months ago, I was very much deep in that, and I mean, it's residual. It's gonna be there.
Ice cream, anybody? You hear that?
Oh, it's 5. That means it's 5 o'clock. The 5 o'clock hour around here.
Choco Taco.
Yeah.
This episode brought to you by Choco Taco.
Yeah, this episode brought to you by the ice cream man that drives down the street.
Yeah.
So rejection is a powerful. Let's just
enjoy that.
Yeah. Can you really even hear it? Probably.
Well, we could until he stopped. Someone's getting ice cream.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. You're the winner of the Choco Taco.
Oh, wow.
Rejection really is a...
It's back. Get me some Marios with some bubblegum eyes. Do they still do the Marios with bubblegum eyes? You told me you don't actually stop and talk to this guy, so you don't have no idea.
I would assume that those still exist. Something with the bubblegum eyes.
I would hope.
SpongeBob with the bubblegum eyes now.
Yeah, it's probably something like that.
Yeah.
They had Marios, they had turtles.
Yeah, maybe we should have that music queued up on the board, and then anytime anybody's like talking down about themselves, you just turn it up.
It would be very uplifting.
Because basically every time I say the word rejection, the music just cranks up.
Yeah, well, it doesn't like that you.
Yeah, it doesn't like that I
feel rejection.
But I take it's personal. It's injury. It's like, how can you reject me? Like it's very ego driven. I'm very much self-involved in that way, where it's like I take it so to heart because I take it as like a personal affront to like who I am, what I have to offer, versus realizing what it is that person might be going through that leads them to make certain decisions. I also think too that we self-preserve.
Yeah.
Quite a bit too.
Elaborate.
It all leads.
Where are you?
Basically, I don't know. I was just thinking about vulnerability. I guess again,
okay.
It's just more like if you communicate, like where I'm coming from, where I don't like asking for help. I don't want to do it myself. It's like I need to prove myself and stuff like that. And so.
Does that come from a family thing, or does that come from?
I don't know. I think about that a lot.
Your feminine energy, because you feel like a woman wants to be proven. Or it's a curious question.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. Maybe
are you
it's an
only
immigrant.
Child?
No, I'm not.
No.
I have a younger sister, but maybe it's a little bit immigrant mentality too. It's like self-reliant in all matters, not just financial and economical, but emotional and stuff like that too.
I like to stand on my own too.
Yeah.
I totally am with you on that.
And to put yourself out there emotionally is dangerous. So that's what I guess that's what I mean by self-preservation.
Yeah.
Like I always think of self-preservation when I think of why we don't communicate.
I'm on your level now. And so there was a moment in my life where I did that, where it used to be that I would go and I'd be the chaser. And so it's a means of self-preservation. I was like, no, I deserve to be wanted. It was a good statement to myself. I deserve to be wanted. But at that point, I put out way less energy and have sense to some degree. I balanced a little better. But
wait, you said you were the chaser, meaning that you were pursuing.
I was often and always pursuing. And because of that pursuance probably came from a not positive space of what I mean, I needed to do some work on myself for sure and have sense. But it came from a space of neediness, and it was
so ironic because when I think of being needy and then what that translates into as far as action goes, it would not be to pursue because it's not like womanly, right?
Yeah, well, and so
right?
we're fed that we have to pursue.
Yeah,
and then
I'm fed that we need to have it come to us.
But then we're in a modern world, and there's this whole other thing that we're fed now that's or through the radar or what have you that says that that's not the case. And I'm like, okay, well, I deserve to be chased too a little bit. I deserve to have that. And so I would go through different relationships or datings or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Datings. Where I would start with, some interest, and I would push that interest. But then I would step back a little, and I would say, okay, I'm not going to chase every time. There was someone I really, there's a particular instance where I remember very clearly. I would keep pursuing and pursuing, and I would even get word from circles of friends. Oh yeah, let Michael know I'm into it. Like, cool. Why don't you let Michael know? And why don't you respond when I say, hey, you want to do something? Oh, I'm busy that day. I was like, cool. You want to throw me a bone and tell me when you're not busy, or do I have to keep coming at you and look fucking desperate? And I wasn't into that, so I just kind of stepped back. And then I didn't get a thing at all, and I was like, okay, well then I guess they're not really interested. And I'm not going to waste that time. And I started to do that more and more to the point that I just stopped really trying in that regard. Of course, that also doesn't really work either. So it did to some degree. I have had sort of relationships develop out of me having that less sort of push and having someone pull in, which is nice. You know, you feel wanted and needed, but then you're like, but then I didn't really feel like I wanted it either because I didn't try to pursue it. So there's this weird sort of mental conversation you have with yourself.
Games. Well, you
games with myself, but
no, but what your story is reminding me that, and it's not in our notes, but the fact that like we are poor at communication, if we're not as self-aware and have done the work, we are poor at communication, but we play games. Yeah. And we play intricate games at that. So your example, you're saying that, you know, they sent through the grapevine a message saying that they were interested, and then when clearly we went on a date. When you acted on it, and when you acted on it, then they like made themselves unavailable. It's like I don't know where that comes from, why we think we need to play games with desire and like to ensure like I don't know where it stems from. It's embedded in some people. It's embedded in some people want to do that. I don't aggravated do that shit. By certain things in culture. Like there are books that tell us how to behave and like not to actually go with what we want, but like what we think like in my case, like what, because I'm trying to date men, I think men want, like I have to act a certain way to get them, because if I act authentically, then I'm in danger of, like it's just ridiculous. Like there's just whole storyline. That's
what's embedded in you, but that's also not in fact truth. And I hope you know that if you act authentically, you will attract an amazing human.
I don't do games. Like games that,
I don't do games. I definitely, everything comes more organically now. Yeah. If I pull back, it's because of my capacity, not because of my thoughts on it.
Right. Actually, that we didn't really talk much about like, comparing college and being more of a grown up and dating, but in my mind, I feel like dating you have more of a
It was fucking in college. It was no dating.
It was fucking college. Exactly. But I feel like you or I don't know, maybe I was rushing to make a point, then I realized maybe it's not really. But when you don't have like grown up problems.
Yeah, well, you have different problems.
You have different problems, right? But now it's like an availability thing. It's like really like I just didn't have capacity in my brain to even be thinking about you. There's nothing like there's no ill intent at all. It's just purely resource.
Yeah. Well, and that is a matured mind thinking about, their levels of output.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have ever thought to use a word in college to say my capacity to do this. I would have been like, yeah, I don't got time, or I don't want to do that, or it's not about it's more primal feeling. To understand that I have this much, room in my resources to give, and where I'm giving those, and how I've organized all that. Honestly, I didn't really understand how to organize myself till I went through therapy. And then it was because of this really cool experiment my therapist did where he threw pillows all over the room. He's like, put pillows around the room and say this is, they represented people. So I organized people and put them in clusters and whatnot. And he goes, and now that center pillow is you. Think about the relationship of those people to you, and then readjust as needed, and then step back and look.
Okay.
And so really what it was organizing my mind and how I felt about people, but I was just instinctively putting, my mom and my sister here, or actually it was my grandmother and my sister, and my mom and my stepdad, and then their relationship to where they stood. And
did you have to think about it too much when you were doing it, or is it
when I did it, I just kind of put them in class. He gave me a brief outline of how to do it without saying the relationship to me. That was the second step after I put them in the clusters. And then it was just like, okay. And you look at it, and I still have a picture of this somewhere roaming around my phone, I'm sure. I keep it because it's a good reminder of where it is and how I'm going to draw those relationships closer or further apart based on what I need. Leading back in, it was the communication with myself that was able to express what I needed, what I was vulnerable about, and moving forward. So it is more than just relationships with your partner, but relationships with everybody.
Well, your foundation of how you communicate in relationships starts with how your parents, right? Like how they modeled it, how they interacted with you. As you were talking about, I was thinking about my parents, and actually I realized, I mean, I knew this, but I didn't really put them together. When things got heated, my dad's communication style was very much like explosive, volatile, and dramatic, very defensive. And then my mom would get frustrated and feel it was futile to even express what she wanted in those heated moments.
It's very hard.
And then stonewall.
Yeah.
Because she shut down, because she's like, it's futile. How can I get what I need? So now I realize.
Did those conversations, do you know if those conversations ever got resolved later, or if she just stonewalled and that was that, and then that was the end of the conversation?
That's a good question. I don't know. I wasn't privy to that part of their relationship, and if that actually happened, or if they just forgot, like, or forgave and move on, or maybe didn't even forgive, but just moved on.
I think it's really common. Oh, I know it's really common to get very like emotionally heightened, and so then you lose your sense of direction. I mean, even in just a simple conversation where I get excited here, I totally lose what I'm talking about.
When I get emotionally, when I'm angry, and it's when particularly any type of like when it's like really powerful anger, romantic relationship or not, I am unable to argue my points, which is very frustrating, because then it's like, then you sound like a just an angry idiot.
And then sometimes that leads to lashing out, depending on the kind of statements. I think some toxic communication often comes out of that.
Oh, for sure. Because that's all you have. That's all you have. Like you're able to just fling poop. Yeah,
my partner and I, we've had this experience over the last year in a couple of ways, and then we've circled back. It can be damaging at times. I definitely felt like I needed a little rev back up to get back like privy to, like I knew like my love hadn't left her for her. But I definitely needed like some healing time for some of the things that we would throw. And it wasn't that it was so bad, but like there's some statements or some tones that get tossed out that you're just like, whoa. And she's got a little more resilient and able to like heal faster on those. And I like, awesome. And I think it's just I am probably a little bit more sensitive. I don't know if that's because I'm American, she's Israeli. She speaks to maybe that could be part of it, but it's also just me. I'm a more sensitive human, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm in touch with those sensitivities, sometimes too much. but yeah, I think when you're going through those moments, it's really easy to start attacking, to start throwing out some statements that may be a little more ultimatumish sounding, or maybe I should leave, or and you're not actually putting out your best thoughts and figuring out a way to take some time to breathe and before having a real conversation about that. If you have the time to do that, is great. And I think sometimes we've been a little better about it now, where we'll take as we've learned to communicate with each other, which is what you're doing those first couple of years or longer sometimes. You start to understand that I'm not going to communicate this well right now. I need a breath. And when we say something like, and we have said stuff like that, like, I'm not in a space where I can actually communicate this well. We need to talk about this a little bit later, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes. And if I say something like that, or she does, the instant reaction is, I can totally respect that. And that actually de-escalates the situation pretty quickly. As a result of
to
it.
have the wherewithal to say calmly, I need some time to process.
I don't know if we say it calmly, but we definitely say it.
Yeah. I mean, that I think is just like a powerful move if you have the wherewithal to realize to ask for that.
Well, and we talk about, I mean, after we've had some bad bad blowouts for us are not really that bad because we've got pretty good communication, and it's usually about the same sort of issues. No, we work on it. I mean, and sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, but generally speaking, it's good. But it's with a lot of work, and we came into each other's lives at a time where we both had done the work to want to be with someone. That was more important than anything, I think, was to have someone who we can look at and be like, we can totally communicate in this way and talk about all the things, but also talk about stupid shit too. You know, a lot of our conversations sometimes are just about the little things. It's about nothing, shows or whatnot.
That's actually, let's dive into some of this.
I've been hitting the list.
Okay. I thought you were doing that.
Yeah.
But
Organically.
Organically. He had a script, everybody. That was all just for show.
Reading a script. I told you I wanted to be an actor.
Some examples of bad communication. I mean, we could just go down the list, really, but
sure.
Psychology Today starts with saying that you statements.
Yeah. So we talk, my partner and I talk about this a lot. It's specifically, so they talk about the you statements here.
And I want to couple you statements and universal statements together because they tend to go hand in hand.
They're kind of
it's
the
like,
same.
You always fucking don't do this.
Yeah. I think the big one for us is the you should. And it should has been a very strong word in my recent life, where I don't believe, we will often say, did you just should me? I should myself. We just try not to, and it's a silly thing, but also shoulding someone, and the difference is, we'll be like, it's the idea is to think about what we're saying. It's like hard should, like I'll tell her, no, that's a hard should. Like, I mean that should, rather than like you should take up yoga or do more yoga.
I'm receiving this different. So I was thinking you guys were meaning
should do something. You should be a certain way. You should have. So
it's conveying that you aren't the thing, and what you should be is something else.
Right, which is actually a negative statement to be making, because they're not. You're telling someone what to do
you're telling someone who they should be.
There's a different way of stating that, where it's a better suggestion. Be like, have you ever tried, or something that implores someone. I think a lot of people get on this. The statements like this, men will get hit from a woman about mansplaining, because it's the you should statements, I think, are the things. It's like the explanatory statements.
Yeah, and we're talking
even
about,
if that's not how it's meant.
Right. But we were talking about defensive and all that. I think
Absolutely.
I think it's indicative of where the receiver is at too, because it could be in the intent, it could be very harmless or even trying to be helpful. But if they're in a place where they feel like they're being judged, or
right.
that is being commented on, then of course they're going to react poorly.
Pointing out how to do something better, but in a constructive way that is loving, I think, is the major point of it. Tone. It's not just tone.
Tone is everything.
Yeah, and your intent has to be spoken in that tone, and I don't always do that. My tones get all fucked up. I for a sound guy, for a signal processor, I don't always process my signals well. Mm-hmm. My partner's very aware of it. My people are, I don't know if my people are aware of it. My partners are very aware of it.
Yeah.
And so I have to express my intent. And sometimes I have to sit there and stand on a pedestal and be like, no, this is my intent. This is what I mean. I'm sorry. It wasn't the way I expressed it. It's how I mean it. So tone is
Yeah.
important.
In one of these articles,
It's funny because I'm a tone junkie, but yet when it comes to what comes
yeah.
out of my mouth.
Well, I mean, there could be different reasons for it, but like one example is if you're not a type that likes to talk about your feelings and saying I feel this and that, and you're very matter of fact, my dude is like that. He very much is very
pragmatic.
Pragmatic, yeah, very pragmatic. In like love language is definitely not whatever it is.
I'm
a
Capricorn too.
Yeah?
We speak very, although so is my partner, but we speak very like.
Yeah, you're very much like here's
direct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's linear. It's about processing.
Wait, your birthday? Did your birthday already happen? That's right.
My birthday just happened. Although when this comes out, it will just happened a couple months ago.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move. There's so many. I want to go through all of them.
Yeah.
So the next two I would want to pair as well. So being tough on the person but soft on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, making your arguments personal versus making it about the issue.
I like the example that one gave. You are so stupid versus you're a smart person. And what you did was not very smart. It makes me sound like my fucking mother. And I'm just like,
if someone said that to me, ooh.
Yeah. But I can understand the sentiment of it is creating negative, saying you're stupid, it creates a dialogue with yourself. You start to put that in your story. You start to believe it. You create negative emotions and resentment.
Unless we have a specific example to speak to, it should be the discussion, the conversation should be focused on the issue and not evaluating the person, unless it's relevant.
Yeah.
But really, that just is adding injury, insult to injury.
Well, so going back, so the you wanted to tie these two together.
Yeah,
so
well, I thought to tie that with invalidating feelings.
And
I feel like you make it personal because you just want to shut down the other person.
Right.
At times. But then now, as I'm saying out loud, it's not always the case.
It's not always the case. Yeah. They're not always tied together. But invalidating feelings is a huge one. To recognize someone's feelings is important, and I think a lot of that.
Well, and acknowledging them means that you are also acknowledging this is what I've learned actually in my particular relationship is that it's kind of a clusterfuck because it's like they react negatively to my bad feelings about something that they've done because they are upset that they've that they need to acknowledge that they've done something to hurt me. Does that make sense?
They act negatively to the things that...
Like I think it's hard to accept and acknowledge that you've hurt somebody you loved, and depending on how you process information like that, you could also react poorly with that information. So it's a very delicate thing to communicate because especially in that moment when someone is upset, because I experienced this very thing. He said to me, "How you feel is your responsibility," I think, or something along
100%.
those lines.
It's a hard thing to hear.
It's a very hard thing to hear. So I was like, oh, okay, snap. So you're saying that you just aren't going to ever be responsible for how I feel, for making me feel basically responsibility for your actions, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's different. Responsibility for actions, so there are things he can do to make sure, to help ensure that you don't have those experiences. But if there are things that take away from him being him, or in him expressing himself or the things that he's doing, that's different.
Well, I mean, just to absolve him of looking like a bad guy, we at this stage when he says, yeah, but just in case he's listening and he feels like I'm trying to frame him that way.
Oh, fair enough.
No, in the moment that we had that conversation, we did not have an agreement or any kind of expectations established. Mm-hmm. It was just me feeling rejected, saying so basically.
Your insecurities.
My insecurities, and him saying how you feel is not my responsibility.
Right.
Or it's all on you or something, however you said it.
Insecurities are your own responsibility. Yeah. I mean, and that's a lot of where we get, I think, our negative communication skills as far as when we're relating to our partners. A lot of the things that come out when we're having issue, I think, have a lot to do with our insecurities, in my experience. So if you're mad or you're sad or you're specifically jealous, I think is all about insecurity. Then, that's a thing that you have to recognize, and you have to be like, why am I? The why am I question is the most important thing, I think. So again, whenever you're communicating with someone else, I feel like the communication with yourself is just equally as important, if not more. And understanding why you're doing a thing is super important, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
always. But depending on the scenario or the instance, if it touches on, if it involves a romantic relationship, it always makes it a little bit harder. There's a layer of difficulty with that. Like, you could be so in touch, right,
Mhm.
with your needs and all that, and communicate with yourself all the time. But yeah, you just get derailed, or I get derailed sometimes. Let's go through some more things.
Yeah.
So there's a list here, and I'm just going to go through them, and we can kind of talk about them as we
Okay.
want to. So, signs, this article frames it as 9 communication habits that are subtle red flags.
Yeah, this was a silly one.
Yeah, this was a silly one, but I wanted to pull some of these things out. So, when you're communicating and you're relying only on texting when they lie, that's actually a very huge one.
The relying on texting one is sort of a thing. I personally think that interpersonal communication is huge. And when you're text-based, I feel like I just don't have a connection.
I wanted to actually talk about this one. So I said earlier, I have trouble saying what I need, or, when I want to bring up something a little uncomfortable. I have trouble verbalizing it, because then it makes me teary and I get emotional, and then my words don't come out because my emotions are heightened, so I'm disorganized, and then the other person responds negatively because they feel bad about how they're perceiving that they're making me feel, all this stuff, right? It's a shitstorm. So then I rely on texting to be able to very, because in word form, there's no emotions all muddling it up, right? So I can clearly go, okay, point A, B, and C, these are the things I've been trying to say.
I think your instinct to write is great. I think texting is a platform that I wouldn't use. I mean, unless they're long distance. I've gotten an email before, which I think is weird too. I think writing,
email is really weird.
I had a partner
because it's like honestly, even more distant. Whereas at least chat or text, there's
and
an
we
immediacy.
lived in the same house, but that was at the time.
Yeah.
Texting wasn't as vibrant as it is now. I think writing a letter is really great. I think it's very personal, and I think it really gets to the points. And I think we've done that. But because I'm long distance, the text format is off. But we use WhatsApp, which doesn't feel like texting in a lot of ways, but it is texting.
It's the same thing. It's
I
just
know,
a different,
but sometimes platform is everything. If you got delivered
Medium
something
is the message. If you learned anything from
Medium is the message.
Our college days.
If you get a text versus an email versus a Facebook.
Shout out to Professor Kielwasser.
Kielwasser
was who I learned that from.
Yeah.
So you guys use WhatsApp.
We
it doesn't feel like chat, but it is.
If we had a big conversation where we weren't able to really kind of get everything out there, I'll sit back and I'll think about what we've talked about. And then I've written almost essay format letters to her to, express here's what I was processing through that. Here's, where I was at. And I don't know why I couldn't communicate this so well, but this is me communicating it now. And this is what I'm trying to work on. And I will try to be better at this. And that's the communication. And it's different when you're looking for needs, but in this case, this was after a fight.
I don't know. I feel like, and maybe this is because this is where I am, my state, where I'm at as far as my, getting better at communicating. I want the immediacy of text, but I feel like I cannot convey myself in a way, in particular things in person, because it puts me in a state that I can't then get everything out, and it just continues to bury whatever it is. So I'm not as there's for me anyway, there's less baggage on it. I think he would prefer that we talk about these things in person, but then sometimes he doesn't receive the way that I communicate things very well either, and it's like a cycle. So for me, it's it's important for me to just even say whatever medium it is. I just need to say these things.
Yeah,
in a way that we can even reference again. But email is too formal, too distant.
What about a letter? I mean, you live in the same house. You can literally write a letter and have it left there.
Yeah, I guess I could do that.
I know that. I know you want the immediacy, but sometimes the immediacy. I mean, sometimes I can resolve it. Sometimes that can heighten it, and sometimes a letter.
Because I want to have the conversation then.
Written, yeah, but you can't have the conversation on text. Timing is everything, right? That's one of the positive ones that we'll get into. But if you have the conversation then, you don't always have the time. That's part of the reason that text exists, is about
Right.
time. Well,
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's why it exists. It's probably for other reasons.
There's a multitude.
Yeah.
But yes, I could write a letter and leave it,
Right. I mean, again,
and
there's
then
nothing
hide around
wrong.
a corner and wait for him to read it.
There's nothing wrong with a text.
Tie it to the dog.
There's
and
nothing
then
wrong with a text, but I
find it.
think demanding immediacy out of the conversation.
I'm not
as a result-
demanding it,
Not
but
demanding
it's
it. I
a
mean,
nice
you'd
aspect
like it.
of that, because
Yeah.
then like
expecting or hoping for the
yeah,
immediacy.
because I would say, even if he's pointed out that he would prefer that I talk about these things in person, I feel like he is also better at communicating like what he feels in response in that medium. So right now it's a Band-Aid that works for me.
Do you express when you're writing this, be like, I recognize that you like talking about this person. I don't have the capacity to express this.
I say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll preface with something like that.
Yeah, because he'll say like, like, you don't ever say anything, and I'm like, well, because in person we're having a nice little time, and it's not at the forefront, and then when you're gone is when it's at the forefront.
Well, that's
Which is actually one of the points in here where it's like problems arise when you're not around each other.
yeah.
So then you have to like figure out how to.
But the problem is there. I mean, you think about the problem when they're not around, because you have processing times. That's why I think that one's kind of a silly one, because that's when you get your time alone is your processing time.
Mm-hmm.
You think about the things you want, the things you need, the things you're getting, the things you're trying to get, the places you want to go, and a lot about our relationships.
Yeah, and you get reflective, and you go, oh, these are things I want to say, and then I have the urge to say that. And
sometimes your insecurities take over in that space because you're too in your head. Like maybe you have a very beautiful relationship, but there have been times in my life where I had things going pretty well with them, but when I was alone, I was thinking, maybe I want to split. Why do I want to split? What's causing me to think that? And then I get back together and be like, why did I think that?
Do you ever figure out why you thought that?
I'm sure it's just insecurities. I'm pretty sure it's a lack of self-love. It's a lack of me thinking I deserve them.
Is it like there's like a void that you wanted to fill and that they weren't there, and you're like, well, I can maybe.
Well, in the past, I think it was because they were not the right partner.
Yeah.
And
I guess if you were asking those questions, then they aren't the right one.
Not always. But yeah, I
that's a whole other thing, by the way, is like the idea
have to ask
of like
yourself questions.
but like the right person and wrong person. I feel like that's also it's so black and white.
So
you could have multiple right people.
Absolutely.
It's
there is no
timing.
one
It's just
right
timing.
person. I think timing is a lot of it. I think it's about every relationship you have. It's about growth. It's about that time in your life. Like you could be with this partner forever. This person might just show up to teach you something incredible and move forward. And maybe you'll still have a relationship and maybe you won't. My last partner expressed that, we were soulmates, and I expressed to her that there are different kinds of soulmates, and that didn't go over so well.
That would not go over well at all. That's like saying, I love you. Thank you.
Well, in my head, and she's right to feel the way she did, because I technically was saying something to that degree in a regard, but in another regard, it wasn't saying that we weren't soulmates. I'm just saying, like, what kind of soulmates are we?
Yeah.
I also, that information was
like,
hard for me because
get in line.
I didn't feel like we were going to be together forever, nor did I. Maybe she did at a point, but I think she came to realize not. I not that I thought it was temporary, but it always felt like we were drawn to each other for something, but it didn't feel like that was my end point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with someone now who, when I look at her, I feel like this is my end point.
It can also be,
but I don't. What's my end point?
Yeah, how do you even presume to know? And also when you get older too, you are more open to whatever an endpoint is.
Yeah.
I
recognize that, I say what I feel and I believe it, but I also recognize that life can treat us in all sorts of different ways and change anything. I don't really know anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe this.
You sure don't.
I know, but I believe this, and I believe that my partner that I have right now is the person that I'm going to spend my days with.
Yeah.
And she believes it, and belief is half of it. I mean, and we communicate about that belief. That's about expressing love. That's another positive communication factor we can get into.
Yeah. I wanted to really quickly just go through the rest of this list because I remember now the reason why I wanted to in the first place.
Yeah.
Is because I this is my life.
Okay.
This is a lot of things that are being done currently or are trying to be worked on and stuff like that. And it's this article kind of phrases it like it's like a state of being and that's it, but it's just more like habits that you need to break or something. So we were at rely on texting, they lie, won't talk about problems openly, interrupt you often, get defensive during arguments, giving you the silent treatment, one-word answers, expect you to read their mind, bringing up the past.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Won't talk about problems openly. This is where it's like, I mean, it's not like there's a not wanting to resolve it.
You in this particular? Because I mean, you were just expressing that to some degree, not talking about.
I think there's a little bit of on both sides, but I know for sure I definitely don't talk about my problems openly because I'm like, I'm good. I don't have problems.
Yeah.
Until it all catches up with me, and then I'm like, okay, I really need to talk about these things all of a sudden. But also because I don't enjoy conflict. I would rather avoid it most times.
Most people would, I think. Right?
Yeah. But some people front like they always talk about their stuff and they really, rationally deal with their things. But I also can't talk about my problems in that context. Always. Yeah, exactly. When I talk about my problems openly, it's like, it's being too vulnerable and then I start weeping. So there's that. That's not fun.
It's okay to weep. I mean,
I'm sick of it. It's almost like a conditioned response. I sometimes wonder if I even really like feel, but at the same time, I don't want to say that because then like, he may then question every time I cry.
Interesting.
Because it happens too much.
Well, you just said it, so.
Yeah.
No, but so I don't know. I think it's important to be able to express to the point and having the vulnerability to cry. The fact that you're able to cry in front of him is its own vulnerability that's very special on its own.
That's true. And I tell him this. I'm like, I am stone cold to everybody else. But when it comes to you, like I'm waterworks.
You allow yourself to cry.
Yeah.
Do you ever
feel honored?
You got to have crying sessions too for yourself sometimes.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. It bothers
you still
me.
Have it.
Yeah. Crying sessions don't bother me as much as it's more like what it's why, right? Yeah. It's the why. And it's also, the way that it makes the other person feel. I think it's communicating something that like it's miscommunicating.
Right.
Right. It's not as bad as it's being received, I guess. They interrupt you often. I feel like, that is.
It's a sign of disrespect more often, but it's
yes, but also, sometimes when you are feeling impatient and disinterested, like those are valid things. Like,
I had to be taught to not interrupt, and I still do it from time to time.
Oh, I do it all the time because
but I'm a strong energy and you're a strong energy.
It's conditioned. Part of it. It's conditioned a little bit too, because it's like if I don't speak up, then this person will continue. It's like it's a little bit of baggage of like male female dynamics, especially in the workplace too, where I found myself in environments where I was expected to be like a presence there. I wasn't like necessarily just waiting for everybody at their beck and call kind of thing. Right. Like I was expected to contribute.
They weren't going to say, Tina, what are your thoughts? You had to be like,
these are my even thoughts. Like my role there was like high enough to like have to say things.
Right.
But it was difficult to get a word in edgewise. And when you did, it was like somewhat diminished or condescended to or something like that. So you have to then create like a little bit more force behind everything you do in order to be taken seriously or just to get people to be quiet and listen.
Why do you need to be heard is the question. Like, what are you trying to convey?
Yeah.
That needs to be heard, and is it important?
Yeah. I say like,
but it is a bad communication thing.
Yeah, it is.
See, I just
but in context, interrupt. I think for me, interruption. I will never necessarily remove the habit of interrupting people out of my actions. Like I feel like it is necessary at many times actually. It's within context.
Sometimes I just get so excited that I interrupt and I don't mean to.
Yeah.
I'm just excitable.
Right. Like I have a point too and I want to make it.
Yeah.
Before
you get on to a new point.
In the context of the show, I'll interrupt you so that we can get back on track.
You're going to need to do that.
I know. And that's what I've been doing.
It's actually a positive communication trait in this.
And then in the workplace, but you're right. In a intimate relationship, it's not, but when you are able
especially
to step back, heightened emotional state, but when you can step back and, like I maybe I'm too generous, but there are times where I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what what kind of a day he's had, and if it's just like, this is not a good time.
Well, that's
This is not a good time to talk about whatever it is.
super important. Understanding. So it's not just timing. So you touched on something that I think is really great, and I got this really cool quote from the author of More Than Two, Franklin Vo, and he goes, when you're talking to your partner about needs and stuff, it is about timing, but he speaks more to your partner needs to understand what it is you're saying, not just like speaking the same language. Don't assume they're going to feel the same way you do. Your partner has to crawl behind your eyes, see the world the way you do. What you tell them, your emotional reality is just an abstraction to your partner. So what is happening in your life at that moment? What kind of day did you have? I've had an argument where the wrong thing was said at just the right time to make the argument happen that didn't need to exist.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have just been a silly comment, and it was supposed to be fun and frivolous. But I had just gotten off the phone with someone who was going through I had an emotional conversation with a friend. And the snarky comment that came after, not even snarky, just kind of fun reference. I took
snarky in one moment, playful in another moment.
I just took the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I took offense to it, and it created a whole embellishment of things. But it's because the state I was in was I was just having this serious conversation, and I was also trying to convey that serious conversation to the person I was talking to. And so it just got out of hand.
Yeah.
And we laugh about it now, but it just.
I mean, this makes me want to say just really quick that arguments and disagreements and fights and whatever, as long as you can make up from them, they're great learning opportunities, because you can't always, you can't, as much as you communicate, you can't predict.
Even if you can't make up with that person, they're still great learning opportunities.
Yeah, there you go.
So every communication you have, whether it is for 5 minutes or for 5 years, is a great learning opportunity.
But if you want to stay with somebody and you argue, that's just the act of arguing and having disagreements itself is not.
It's important.
It's not a statement on your relationship and defining it. It's just an opportunity.
Well, it depends. It can.
So but
so I think it's very, very important, and I've always firmly believed it's very important to have arguments, not even arguments or fights, but like to have disagreements and to have heated conversations where you can learn, because that's also a vulnerability state that we get into. But it teaches you to learn, it teaches you to grow, it teaches you to be closer, and hopefully it teaches you to communicate better so that you don't have those arguments. Now, when you're having the same argument about the same thing all the time, you're not growing or learning, and you have to step back and look, okay, what are all of our arguments about? Why are they about it? How can we change this?
Right.
And I think it's simpler for me being in a relationship that's only a year deep. We have a conversation, and a lot of it's because of our distance, and we've figured out how to navigate that. But we were having sort of the arguments stemming from the same core. In past relationships, it could be all over the board, and in relationships that are much longer, let's say 10, 20 years, have you even had those arguments? Or are you just arguing, but you're not actually arguing about the issue? You're arguing about the circumstances, but the core of it's never addressed. And I think
you may not even know what the core is.
Right. Well, so it's like treating a sickness. You're treating the flu. You're treating the symptoms, but you're not treating the
bug.
Yeah, the bug. The bug needs to be treated.
Yeah.
It needs to be examined. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be 86'd, or just massaged into a new space, depending on what kind of bug it is.
I mean, disagreements and all those opportunities, as I want to look at them. I mean, it's learning patterns so that you could recognize. You're gaining information so you could recognize the signs of certain states of mind, and that you can then understand
triggers, understand
exactly how to communicate with it, or when is good time, when is a good time to talk to somebody.
Just because my past partner might have been really good at arguing, having those conversations in the heated moment,
really good at arguing,
or it doesn't mean my current one will. And how do you, keeping in mind that every person you have a communication with is going to be a very different sort of flow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have so many different friends. I feel like, it's why I've always had a lot of different friends. I love having those different conversations and learning the different ways of communicating with people and how they see it. Which is exactly why I'm looking forward to when we have guests here, because they're going to see things very differently than us.
Yeah.
And we, in many ways, see things very differently. I think on this topic, we have for the most part, a lot of very same ideas about it.
Well, I don't think you can really have, communication, what is effective communication and what is ineffective? I think it's
pretty finite.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, there's not a whole lot of nuance. It's like the situations maybe can be read differently and interpreted differently. But as far as principles, I think they're pretty standard,
Yeah.
So getting defensive during arguments, we talked about being defensive a lot. Silent treatment. So for the silent treatment, it's not like silent treatment, like I'm not going to talk to you for days. It's just more like I don't even know what to say or how to say it.
Well, that's different.
And so it's like, yeah, but it could be received. I guess it could be received as...
The silent treatment is normally, oh, so you're just not going to talk to me now, versus
I've been accused of such.
Okay,
versus
like where you have nothing to say and you get you
could still be mad.
What
and
you're
like
talking
not
about
really feeling
in the
like
conversation?
Saying anything. No, like after the fact. After the fact.
In the conversation, I look at that as sort of like a shell shock. Like I don't always have something to say, but I'll have something after.
Well, fight or flight. Flight. It's flight. It's like, or freeze. It's like, I don't know.
My previous partner, when we had fights, luckily we had 2 rooms in the apartment, and we would have fights, and then at a certain point, whether the fight was over or just when it got to a certain point, we'd walk out of the room and I'd go into my little office space, my little creative zone. And after a while, you just hear this very soft, like, Michael. And it'd be like, yeah. And then we would have like a little makeup moment.
Yeah, the makeup routine is my favorite. Let's go into how we can improve our communication. Because I feel like, it's a skill that can be learned, and it's a skill that needs to be practiced.
Uh-huh.
And every new relationship has to be relearned all over again in some ways because of how they communicate and
you've taken on your new information, and now you have to practice it.
Yeah.
You've taken it on. Hopefully you've had time to soak after the relationship, heal, do your positive things. I know after my last relationship, I did a lot of like positive communication with myself, surrounded myself in positive sticky notes, started doing a lot more better fitness, treated myself better. Got myself to a space where I could have these conversations with myself about what I did wrong, what I need to improve on, and what I can bring to the table for myself and for the next relationship. And there was a book that actually I remember listening to that really pushed on that. And it's like, you can't ask, and this is true of communication, but true of everything. You can't ask of somebody else something that you can't give yourself. Mm-hmm. So if you want someone who, has wealth and success and is fit in all these things, you also have to be practicing. You don't have to have, the highest capacity of those, but you have to be practicing those lifestyles and getting yourself to those spaces. And so if you want someone who is good at communicating, you have to practice to be a better communicator. Mm-hmm. So that's when I feel like you really can put the lessons to the test.
Yeah.
Is that new relationship, and you start that foundation trying to build it.
Yeah.
Each relationship is an experiment, right? So I would say this is my most successful experiment yet.
Yeah. It can feel really daunting to have to work on being a better communicator because it's unpacking a lot of things, and it may require the assistance of a therapist or, like a third party, right?
It's 100%.
But what I did like was that there are little kind of seemingly silly tactics that can actually at least breed a good environment to be conducive to better communication.
Yeah.
I think. You could tell me if you disagree.
Are you talking about some of these tactics?
Some of these little tactics. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like things like, checking in with somebody daily and just finding out how they're doing.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of little things like this can be taken for granted because we want to bring up things when they're bothering us or bigger issues that they kind of cloud kind of the little delightful things that are also information about our partner and about their experience in the world and stuff like that and with you.
The little things are some of the most important. In fact, The big things are usually things that you can get over the hump. You battle through them, but you can get over that hump as long as you've attended to the little things.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're not attending to the little things, then the big things are stacked on top of the little
and
things,
they're
and you have
huge.
no foundation.
But they're also, they become even
right. So then it's just where do you start?
Yeah.
And there's one way down the list here that says one issue at a time. That's where you start.
Focusing, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it also touches on some other things, like
that's
these kind
true of your personal issues too.
Yeah.
And your personal communication with yourself.
That's true, yeah.
Otherwise, you overwhelm, and
well, you don't even know where to
seems
begin.
impossible.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You're in a pessimistic state versus an optimistic state, and it's destined to fail at that point.
Right. It becomes It becomes way overwhelming because then you don't even know.
My mom used to be really good about doing today's to-do lists and be like, "This is what I'll do," and she'll start at the top and she'll just tack her way down all the way to the bottom. And then she'd have her goal boards too. So she knew what her general goals were too for that year, vision board, goal board. So she can really work on those particular issues. And they would have different, ideas in her head. Yeah.
It also is important to have a positive outlook and believe that things can change, believe that if a relationship is in a bad state, that's not the permanent state. It's just what you're going through. So being willing to work on it is a sign of being positive also.
And it's hard to have that positive outlook sometimes. I've definitely been in states.
Sure.
This last year, and sometimes the positive outlook is not about the positive outlook with the relationship, but with yourself, which affects the relationship too. So you really have to work on being positive.
Yeah.
One way that
but you will definitely doom a relationship if you're like, this is over.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's because you've decided.
So there's a few ways that I have learned that are really good at creating that positive that positive outlook in your life. And a lot of this, there's a couple of books that I got this from. There's my previous partner. She was not overly, there's no such thing as overly, but she's an extremely positive human being, and just the way that she walks through the world. And sometimes to the point where you're almost envious and you get angry. Oh, you're so goddamn positive. But I loved it. And it was a sponge that I got to soak up for the 2 years. And so some of the things are waking up and just speaking maybe 10 things you're grateful for every day. Yeah. Keeping a positive outlook on life. Listening to like audiobooks or something where you're putting positive information, not necessarily nonfiction, whatever. I'm talking like positive learning, whether it's self-help books or whether it's just learning something every day. Keeping that you feel that method of going through your life and feeling like you're adding some sort of substance to your world. Meditation totally keeps you in a more positive state. Being in a better physical condition, which I know you're very aware of, coming from a fitness background, keeps you in a positive state, keeping that adrenaline flowing. Eating right keeps you in that positive state. All these things are going to keep you in a positive state so you can be in a positive
your
place
health,
with your
your
communication.
Your health, and I mean that in mental health and physical health impacts your outlook.
And your sexual health.
And your sexual health, very much so. Yeah. That is physical and mental. So it impacts your outlook, and then your outlook impacts how you relate to other people. Yeah. And then, if it's bad, you end up being an internet. Yeah. Let's see. Talking things through before they happen. I really liked this one where, when we were saying earlier, you don't know what the other person, what their day was like, or, you can't know if it's a bad time, right? Unless you know more about the person and whatnot. So if they can give you a heads up and communicating like, hey, this is, I'm about to enter a stressful couple weeks. If they know that's if they know. Yeah, but if you can, it's nice.
But even so, I mean, on that regard, there was another one, I don't know if it's here, but I do remember reading it at some point, which was just allowing your partner to know what mental space you are in prior to the conversation. So like you're about to have a conversation, maybe it's a conversation
about saying now it's not a good time, basically.
Well, not necessarily now is not a good time, but like, hey, we're going to have this conversation. Where are you at? Are you in a happy state? Are you in a side? Where are you at? Just to kind of express, like, because sometimes when I'm in a more positive or confident state, like I will express the things that I want to do and be more open and willing. And then sometimes when I'm not, I will be a little bit more on the fear side and let that operate. So where are you operating from?
Yeah.
What's conditioning your statements right now?
Right. And you have to, that person needs to have that solid like self check-in to even be able to give you that information.
Well, and that's a big thing is you have to keep checking in with yourself. You know, not just what is this? Yes, not just what you feel, but why you feel the way you do. Make that active effort. That was coming from also from Franklin Vaugh's book. And I really recommend that book to anybody, not just if they're, it's about polyamorous relationships, but I think the communication, you can just, if you're not into that, or it's an interesting exploration, but if you're not into it, that's fine.
Yeah.
The communication details, like what they line up in there.
Yeah. Successful polyamorous relationships are ninjas of communication.
Absolutely. And that book specifically really outlines in great detail about how to communicate about different situations. And you could just, every time they talk about those polyamorous situations, you could just kind of skew them into how they fit for you. Some of them are specific, but they still are good developmental communication skills.
Let's keep going through this list.
So saying more than two, by the way.
What?
Oh, the book was more than two. I think I said that. I don't
more
know.
Than two? Oh, yeah. The name of the book.
The name of the book.
More than two.
I recommend reading it. I should tell them the name.
More than two. Yes. Some of the things that we take for granted, you know, like we should say thank you more often. Absolutely. We should flirt.
Yeah, with your partner.
With your partner. Yeah, I don't mean you and I mean like you and your partner.
Aren't we? No, we're not. Yeah, no, totally you should flirt. You got to keep that sexual energy going. Because you have to let them know they feel special.
Exactly, because you have to remind them. Because if you think you got it in the bag, that's when you're going to lose it.
Yeah, when you get too comfortable, it's totally an issue.
Yeah, because you want to keep things exciting.
Do you guys flirt?
You want
do you and your partner flirt?
Yeah, I mean it gets hot and cold sometimes.
Yeah. But well, that your relationship is
we're in flux constantly.
Yeah,
like we're still processing. But we like to flirt, and we actually have talked about this. Is a subject that's come up recently where it's like being in the headspace to flirt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes and because we're not flirting right now doesn't mean that romance is dead. It's just like that I like, for example, for me, I'm in an evaluation period and maybe I don't feel sexy, but I appreciate that you're trying. Like, you know, I appreciate because that's what I want. I want that external validation, right? So it's very tasty when I get that. Totally. So just being verbal and reminding someone that you're attracted to them is everything. Mm-hmm. Everything.
Absolutely. I totally had a similar experience with my partner recently. Working long hours, I come back and she was, at this particular moment, she was on the East Coast. So we have a 3-hour difference on top of this. So I have to get to her before she goes to bed. And I get back and it's right after work. I haven't transitioned. I haven't had time to sink into me. I'm tired. It's been a 12-hour day. I've been up since 5:30. I've worked hard. There's a lot of physical demands. To express myself in a sexual manner, especially verbally, you know, it's different if you have that partner there and you can physically do that.
No, I know. The long distance,
you could just sink into bed. And you can just you can rub when you're in bed. You can flirt in other ways.
You could just literally be in a puddle together. Yeah.
Right. Or you know, I'll eventually, even if I feel like I don't have any energy, I'll eventually muster up some sort of sexual energy. Yeah. Just because she's there. Just because I feel her body and I'm like, yes.
Well, yeah, because you don't get it a lot.
Well, no, I mean, even if I tend to believe, I'd like to tend to believe that even if she was here often, that would happen. We have a strong sexual energy between us.
Yeah, but you know,
but who knows? I mean, but so
I say that because this kind of flow is very familiar.
Yes, and I also have lived with a person, and I know that can sometimes go up and down. But again, that's also about the communications you're having and expressing needs. In this case, I just have no mental capacity to feel sexy in that moment and to have any flirtations, and so it comes off as dry. The day after I get a good night's rest, it's all back. It's just like, oh, there's my human. Yeah. There's my person again.
It's like, I've
but
always
it's
been there, just a tired version of it.
yeah. I just don't have the capacity, and I expressed
Yeah.
it, and then she'll poke the bear a little bit, but
Right,
like,
because she's raring to go.
but then it's a little flirty too because we have a whole our communication when we're on the phone.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're talking when we're talking like, how was your day, how was your work stuff, but there's a whole like different voice and like characters that
Oh
we
yeah,
take on where it's a
certainly.
cutie thing, which
Yeah.
is its own little flirtation in its own.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I take on
It's
a
a-
whole other voice when I'm feeling like I'm positioning myself a certain way, like the
No,
like,
I mean just in our day-to-day conversation. We just
Oh,
have
yeah.
like we're silly.
Oh, you're yeah.
Oh baby. But it's a different, I'm not gonna exploit our
No,
pun
you
thing.
keep that for yourself.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's we have a very silly sort of way of playing with each other, and sometimes it feels like such our own little bubble world that I get confused at the like, I'm like, oh wait, this is my voice, and like when you're faking an accent.
No, I've
Have
never.
you done that?
I have, but I've never gotten so lost that I
So
don't know
lost
my
in
own
it?
voice. But the long distance thing, I wanted to say. So, and it relates to flirting and stuff like that. I've, he's asked me or said to me like, "Oh, you're more flirty when we're far away from each other."
Well, distance makes the heart grow fonder.
No, but he's misconstruing what's actually happening. It's that I love when we like the physical proximity, because then you don't have to use words. When you are far away from each other and you have to create intimacy,
You have to express.
you
yeah.
have to constantly express, even if that's not what you're feeling, because you have to preserve like some kind of connection all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you're right. I was more flirty back then because I needed to continuously remind you that I was there and that that I was thinking about you, and this is how I did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing when you have a relationship that is longer distance or is based on your communication. I mean, all relationships are based on the communication being key, but the long distance, you really have to put that extra effort into talking about your feelings and your expression of love and your connection and just being extra flirty. And then sometimes, I mean, you don't get that sexual energy too. I mean, we're in a position where we can actually seek that, but we like getting it from each other. So we'll develop ways where we'll do a little phone sex, or we'll do something where we can have some sexual exchange there. Sometimes we'll be the video chat.
I think
something.
It's crazy important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fun too. And
it is fun.
And to be honest, she never really experienced it. And I brought that to her. And when we first started, she was like, I'm not into this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay. But I was persistent. And it was like one conversation. I was persistent. The first attempt was and then I sort of like slyly, organically, like worked my way back into it. And I found the niche that she needed to get. Now it's open.
Yeah.
So for me, that's like the first time you had beer, or the first time you had wine, or drinking a nice wine, or
because you have your preconceived notions about what this is that you're doing.
You have to find the opener that opens your palate, so that you have a taste for it, and then you start to explore the world of it.
Yeah.
So I needed to get that opener. And once I did, now we have a really expressive sexual communication when we want to, or have the capacity to do that. And she's really good about letting me know if I'm not. Sometimes I get lost in my world, or I'm working too hard. She's really good about letting me know what she needs, which is another one that's on this list.
Yeah, ask for what you need. Let's just go there.
This one says request apologies when you need it, but she's good about that too. But generally speaking,
that's a tough one, I feel like, because especially depending on the timing.
She doesn't necessarily say I deserve an apology, but she'll express that she needs that apology. Like that was.
Did you say like you made me feel this way when, and then the
implication
is that
sometimes it's I don't deserve to be spoken to, or I don't deserve that sort of thing.
Okay, that
so
makes
there's
sense.
there's different expressions.
I think you owe me an apology.
No. But there's different ways to fish for that apology. But let your partners know that you need that, and it's harder if they actually say I need an apology than if they just express it and you come to it on your own. But if you're not in a space to express it and come to it on your own, then that olive branch sometimes just needs to be extended, and you just need to say, look, I feel like I would love an apology, but if you ask for it, sometimes it won't satisfy you to get it unless it's really a real apology. And that's the difference. Comes back to tone and inflection, is how you express that apology makes a lot of sense. How you come to it.
Yeah. And maybe the other person didn't even realize that you still needed that. Like maybe if they
Yeah.
thought that you had mended things and
And
that wasn't a necessary
doesn't have to
piece.
be a deep apology either. It could be simply like, you're right. That was inappropriate.
Ownership of how you made someone feel is a very challenging.
Own being wrong. That's on the list.
Yeah, own being wrong, taking responsibility for how you make someone feel, even if
really hard to get there.
You know, because you could disagree, so you have to then have empathy for like where they stand on it, but also examine and see where you can recognize like where they may be right, which can be hard in a passionate moment of anger.
I usually am so I've worked really hard to being able to own being wrong and to apologize. And I pride myself in being able to do it pretty well. Sometimes it takes me a little longer. Sometimes it comes in the form of the letter, like I was saying, where I can collect my thoughts and be out of that state. But it takes a lot of work to get there, to be able to tell someone I'm sorry, and also to, while you're in that heightened state, be able to like figure out a way to flick the switch off and be like, I know I'm still frustrated and I want to be right, but I know I'm wrong.
Those moments are really funny.
But you don't want to tell them you're wrong.
Yeah. So, but you
need to, and you have to. So I'll take a breath.
Yeah.
I'll process it in my head, and I'll try to like put it through the expediting process.
Yeah. That de-escalation from like you're convinced that you're right, and then you realize mid like anger that you're like, oh, I'm a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like an idiot also because now I have to apologize. I'm not ready though, and there's that like de-escalation, and then you finally
just have to say it doesn't have to be like I'm sorry for this, and this, but you do. So and then there's a whole other way where you do. There's another which tinges on bad and good communication. So what we're talking about is, yes, just make the apology. And the thought that just came to mind is sometimes when I'm in a state where I don't feel like I am wrong, or at least to some degree, but I totally feel like I'm responsible or wrong for making, I'm sorry that I made you feel that way is an important statement too. Even if I don't feel like I'm wrong for the actual action, I'm sorry that my actions have made you feel this way.
You know, really quick,
that's
though,
a touchy space to be in.
I was gonna say, yeah, because that could be received poorly.
That goes back to the jealousy conversation too, where you're like, well,
like
my
saying,
action is gonna happen, like.
Right.
But that's different. Anyway. That's something you're about to do, and where we were having that jealousy conversation. I'm about to go on this date. I'm sorry that makes you feel this way. Versus, I just did this, but I feel like this is a thing that I needed to do, I wanted to do. I'm not sorry for having done that. I am sorry for the way that made you feel. And that sucks sometimes. Sometimes that can be hurtful. Well, it hurts the person, but that hurt becomes, if your intent was not to hurt the person by doing what you were doing or to create any friction, sometimes you have to get deeper into that expression of that. Sometimes that doesn't matter because what I think and my worldview may not be the same as what you think in your worldview. And
I also
that's
feel
where
like,
it becomes.
I feel like some toxic people will then use that angle
and
to get away with murder.
There's absolutely a toxic way of expressing that and a positive way of expressing that. And it should be not used. It should be, used. We'll go with used, but there's a better way. You should not doing that unless it's something you really feel that's the case on. You shouldn't do that just because, here it goes, shoulding everybody. Y'all shouldn't do that.
Shitting all over the place. And it depends.
Yeah, well, it all depends. I don't feel that it's right to be doing that when you're just trying to be right or just trying to win an argument. I think that should be utilized.
Or just trying to move about life without apologizing for any of your bad actions.
No, and you have bad actions. I have bad actions. We will do things, and you should be able to apologize for those. But at the same time, sometimes your actions are fine. Like, your freedoms are necessary to go about and live and be you. That's why your partner supposedly loves you. And if you're doing something that makes you, and you're having to apologize for that because your partner didn't like it for some reason, even though your partner has been with you and knows that you do these things, but now maybe is not expressing that. These are just examples. Maybe they're just expressing, hoping that you change or something. You shouldn't have to apologize for that. You should just be like, I'm sorry that my actions make you feel that way, but this is something I enjoy doing, or this is something that
this is important to me.
Yeah,
whatever it is. Yeah.
Hopefully that it is the case, that it's something that's important to you, not just something you're doing because you're being an asshole and you're like,
or deliberate, but then that the intent is different there. Yeah.
Intent is important.
Yeah.
But also your partner can never know your intent. You have to be able to express that, and you have to conveying where you're coming from is important. And I think a lot of times when we're going through something, where one of my strong suits, I believe, is that even if it's not in the moment, I'm able to convey to my partner what it is where I was coming from with it. And I'm like, look, maybe I didn't react the best way. Here's where I was coming from. Maybe it's not the best place. I can work on being better, but I want you to understand where I was at and why this process was happening. Because I think understanding your partner, the apologies are important. Absolutely. That's you understanding that you've done something wrong or that you want to move past something, but understanding where it came from so that you can, again, recognize the bug rather than the symptoms.
Yeah, understanding is everything.
Right. So that's why I like that as a way of communicating with my partner and sharing. It's sharing. It becomes, we get closer as a result of that healing process of whatever that communication
Because if you don't
dysfunction
explain
was.
your thought process, you'll never be able to understand each other.
Right. There's this funny term I really liked. This is the last thing from Franklin that I wrote down. It's called blue tuba fish. What the fuck is blue tuba fish, right? And that's the idea. It's his way of saying it's this concept of difficult concepts for someone from an entirely different worldview to conceive. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about, in this case, they're talking about, again, polyamory. This is a great example of it, but there's all sorts of different ways we could be talking about it. But when I talk about that and you're like, I just don't understand how you fit into that relationship category, it's like blue tuba fish. That shit doesn't make any sense to me. That's just, you're speaking gibberish.
Yeah.
So that can be very much the case when you're having those conversations or those arguments, I feel like, where your partner has no idea where you're coming from. And so, maybe you have a good, maybe you're coming from the best place, but, or the best intentions, but they don't grasp it because they don't see that. So again, that's about letting your partner in. And that's about a lot of vulnerability that you're going to have with your partner, which is why we have, plane.
That's a chopper.
It's the chopper.
They're looking for somebody.
It is why we have, or I believe part of the reason we really want to have partners in our lives so that we can express those deep feelings and thoughts and vulnerabilities. That's our human nature.
Yeah. So we haven't even touched on physical, like nonverbal, like how come I don't have words right now? Like your body language. That's what I'm looking for. Because that's sometimes I find myself, my body doing something in response or the way it looks is received like not as it was intended, like I'll sometimes look like I'm rolling my eyes, but it's not really rolling my eyes. It's just more like looking for words.
Yeah. Some people have resting bitch face. You have have resting sassy, rolling sassy eyes.
Not even rolling sassy eyes. It's not sassy. It's just more like searching eyes.
Yeah.
Sassy searching eyes.
Yeah.
Sassy searching eyes, and I do have a resting bitch face sometimes. I'll be in the kitchen doing whatever. Oh yes, I do. I have an Asian face. I have an Asian face. Is predominantly where resting bitch face is.
I've never,
and all my features turned down.
Okay, I don't know if I've ever received that from you. I have always thought that maybe there's a sassy look, but I don't know if I've ever received the RBF from you.
Or maybe it's resting sad face actually.
But it's different though because
you don't see me at my fully rested state.
No.
So
but I also think that our rapport is a very sassy rapport in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
so I think that I interpret it because that's what we exchange. That's our communication sort of lifeline.
There are times where I'm just in the kitchen doing whatever, or I'm like looking in the distance thinking about something, and he walks in and he goes, why are you so sad?
Oh yeah.
I'm like, nah, I'm just existing. Like I'm
Yeah.
not, there's nothing here.
I've gotten the roll eyes before. Like, are you rolling your eyes? I'm like, no, I was literally looking up. I was thinking. I was trying to like figure out the words, and that is what your eyes do. They
Plus,
look up into your little database.
And
like,
sometimes what I do too is I go like that because I'm like searching. I'm like frustrated at myself for being able to. But that just it sounds just. But no, I don't blame them because that sounds exactly like how it's received.
Yeah.
So being very cognizant of your body language is something I think that's even harder.
Oh, and I mess it up all the time.
Because
tone, inflection, and body language. Yeah. Although it's much easier when my body language probably speaks for itself better than my tone and inflection sometimes. Mm-hmm. And it's easier when I'm in the physical presence of someone versus on the phone. Our conversations, I think they go better.
Yeah. And thinking culturally too, you never know. Like there's just so many layers to that. So it could be blue tube of fish, but in the physical expression form. Yeah,
or you could just have a really good poker face, and then all of that goes out the door.
Yeah, arguably, I've had too good of a poker face my entire life. I would say, generally speaking, like the best way to improve your communication really is to do it.
Yeah, you got to practice.
You got to do it. You just got to do it, and you got to keep a positive outlook.
All languages need to be practiced, and in this particular, it's a love language, but it's.
But focusing on good communication as well as bringing things up when they bother you.
Focus on good communication with yourself. Learn who you are, but where you're coming from, why you're doing things, and share that with your partner.
Because they could also experience in that journey too.
Yeah.
Like,
you're going to learn something. You're actually just going to build a better bond by sharing the whys.
Yeah. And if anything, it's pretty attractive when you know someone is actively working on themselves and they're letting you in on that.
100%.
Yeah. It's another form of intimacy.
Yeah. I couldn't be with someone I couldn't grow with and didn't work on growth themselves. And in the moments in my life when I was a little bit more stagnant on my growth, my attractiveness went down to my partners, and we eventually, broke it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, communication is the key to everything, really.
Yeah.
I really think we're here to interact with each other, to express love, to experience things, and if you don't have good communication, you're creating bad experiences. So. I'd implore everybody to work on creating positive experiences and positive communication in their everyday life, but especially with your partners, especially if you want to make it work. If you want to make it work, you'll work on these. If you don't, you'll talk about wanting to make it work, and you'll just let everything implode. I'm grateful that we have all these resources and that we can build ourselves to be better humans in this world around us.
Indeed.
Right.
And on that note, I think we've communicated quite enough.
Yeah, probably
already.
Over.
But we appreciate you sticking by and actively listening. Thanks, guys.